Morning, Jeff Hampton. I'm a regional development officer with Business Oregon, the state economic development agency.
Melissa Evers. I work at Intel in the software organization.
Kevin Mackey. I'm from the Information Technology Group at Oregon Health Science University.
I'm Joe Bull. I'm the Dean of the Massey College of Engineering and Computer Science at Portland State University. Great to see everybody.
Amy Vandervliet. I'm a labor economist with the Oregon Employment Department. I'm Janelle Ives. I serve as Oregon CTE State Director from the Oregon Department of Education.
Jeff Rhodes, Arts, Information, and Communication Technologies Education Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education.
Robert Westerman, Business Manager, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 932.
Andrew McGough with Work Systems.
I do a solo. Good morning. I'm Kyle Richie-Knoll, and I am with the Oregon Business Council, running from another meeting. So sorry, I'm a little bit late.
The online folks can't actually speak. So welcome to online. We do have, I will call out who's online as far as we know. Alex and Ronan's keeping us up to date. So we have Brooke Brownlee from PGE, Belinda Batten from Oregon State University, Senior Advisor for Special Initiatives, Mark Hetz, Executive Director, HIT Commons, and Deb Mumhill, Executive Director, Oregon STEM. And yeah, so far that's who's on the line. And we'll go, why don't we, oh, thank you. We could jog around the table. We'll do the rest of the room.
Thanks. Vince Porter with the governor's office.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Ingram Eccles. I am from Oregon State University.
Daniel Holbrook with the Oregon Broadband Office.
Carrie Thomas with Future Ready Oregon.
Julia Steinberger with the HEC. Amy Cox with the HEC.
Jay Ward with Oregon Tech Legislative Affairs.
Harry Michael Dowdland with the HEC. Laura Idem with Future Ready Oregon.
My name is Emily Zuber. I'm Office Specialist 2 for Future Ready Oregon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ronan Fitzsimons-Bray. I'm the Administrative Specialist and Public Meetings Administrator for this consortium.
Perfect. All right. Now I will turn it over to our executive leadership team. Dr. Scar, you go.
Morning, everyone. Lisa Scari, President of Mount Hood Community College. It's wonderful to see you all again, and thanks to the folks that have been working on the funding formula or the funding considerations we'll be addressing today. I just wanted to give a few opening comments of kind of what's been going on in my world that may relate to you. For those of us in higher ed, well, actually probably all of us, right? It's legislative season. So whether we're working in Salem or tracking things back in DC, it is the time of the year where it's kind of crazy. I did want to call to your attention, at the federal level, there is workforce Pell bill that's part of the Jobs Act. And Senator Merkley is a co-sponsor on that. The significance of this is it would provide financial aid for programs that are 150 clock hours. And one of the challenges has been students who in short-term programs don't qualify. So there's probably a lot of students that have been denied access just because of that financial parameter. So if we think about from the employer's standpoint, the ability to have funding for some of these short-term training programs that support your workers, if you're so inclined, I would encourage you to send your legislators a note that this is a good thing. On a more personal note, I have just assumed the role of president of the Oregon President's Council. And I'll be doing that for the next 19 months. One of my colleagues decided it was time to retire early, so I had a jump in on this a little bit earlier than expected. But one of the interests I have related to both this group and the other industry consortiums is how to make sure that the colleges are aware of what's happening and can best utilize and plug into the work that's being done in the consortium. So I will turn it over to Skip.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Skip Newberry with the Technology Association of Oregon. One personal update just from me as well. I'll be joining the Workforce and Talent Development Board, first meeting next week. So I'm excited to look for additional linkages between workforce and economic development priorities in the state, which is, I think, an important kind of ongoing effort. A few other things that might be of interest to this group too. Obviously with the legislative session in full swing and a lot of conversations going on around artificial intelligence. That's going to continue to be, I think, top of mind for a lot of companies as they're looking to figure out how to integrate artificial intelligence into different operations and different functions and roles. And so there's going to be a lot of attention being paid, I think, to needs on the part of employers when it comes to reskilling and upskilling and certifications, micro-credentialing, et cetera. And this is already something that we're hearing a lot of from the member companies that we're working with. And that includes both established businesses as well as pure tech companies. And then, of course, looking at some of the needs when it comes to higher ed, K through 12, and folks who are just breaking into their first tech career. That's going to be another concern is on the pipeline side of things. Venkat?
Thank you, Skip. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming, especially making the trek in high traffic. So Jennifer asked me to talk a little bit about what has been going on in my world. And we went through 2 funding working groups for the Technology Industry Consortium. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. And then I missed those working groups because Congresswoman Bonamici had visited NVIDIA and Skip was there too. And she came to evaluate or get updates on a tech hub on macrofluidics. This is a partnership with HP and NVIDIA on cooling our AI servers. And she also has been appointed to a federal task force on AI. And she reached out asking for some help. So I look forward to being able to help her with that. Let's see. Oh, one other, on a personal note, I was appointed to the AI Advisory Council by Governor Kotek. So I look forward to those meetings. I think they're going to be starting in March, the first one of those. So we'll see how that goes. That's it from my side, I guess.
All right. Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and move right into the agenda, and we've got public comment scheduled at this time. Ronan, has anyone signed up for public comment? Okay. And I'll pause. Sarah, did we have anyone indicate public comment? Okay. All right. Then we'll move to our consent agenda. You should have a copy of our November meeting minutes in your packets. Please note particularly the attendance. Kyle Richie Knoll, I think you were here at the last meeting. Yeah. So if we could move Kyle Richie Knoll from excused to present for November, that would be great. Are there any other edits to the meeting minutes from November? Hearing none. Does someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes? Thanks, Andrew. Although, Andrew, I don't think you were here, so you can't move to approve the minutes.
I have a correction to the minutes as well, sorry.
Okay.
I'll move.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so adding Andrew to the excused list and moving Kyle to the members present list. Melissa has moved to approve the minutes with those two adjustments. Are there any other adjustments that need to be made? Otherwise, everybody comfortable with moving this forward? Anyone objecting? Thank you. Okay, minutes approved. So as Turner mentioned, we're going to spend the bulk of our time today really diving into the recommendations that the working group developed over the last several weeks. And we'll have the opportunity to hear from Venkat and Dr. Nagy in a little bit about those. But before we move to that, we wanted to talk a little bit about consensus decision-making in general. I'll remind you all that when we kicked off our work last year, I was going to try to remember the month and it's escaping me, but when we kicked off our work last year, we reviewed the charter, and we will likely come back to that at our next meeting. But I just want to remind you that in the charter, we have a couple of sections on decision making and accountability and our approach to making decisions as a group. And we are proposing a consensus-based decision-making process. We're going to practice that today. You have the opportunity to move through the recommendations approval in a decision with a consensus approach. And then we'll use that to affirm what's in the charter or make adjustments to the charter when we revisit that next time we convene. We want to recognize that this body is advisory to the Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the Workforce and Talent Development Board. Ultimately, HEC staff has the decision-making authority. This body is providing recommendations to the HEC for that in terms of process. Let's see. So to that end, it's important that as we move through the consensus building process, we have the opportunity to hear everyone's viewpoint to inform those recommendations. So Turner, again, will walk us through that process, but I wanted to make sure that we had the chance to just acknowledge that each of you have been invited to this table because of your unique expertise in technology, workforce and talent development, and the perspective that you bring to the table with a balance of employers and industry leaders, as well as education and training providers and labor organizations and community-based organizations. That diversity of representation is what allows us to move sort of collective decision-making and collective goals forward. And so as we're recommending the consensus building process, that's why we've engaged with Oregon Consensus and Turner and his team because of their experience in this work and helping us really ground our approach as we are launching. So I'm going to turn it over to Turner. He's going to talk a little bit more about the consensus approach to decision making, and I think we're going to get to practice that a little bit.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Okay. So the proposal that's being offered up by HEC, and I think it's been reviewed by the executive leadership team as well, is a consensus-based decision-making approach for this group. So specifically, the goal is to advance consortium decisions by consensus, and we'll use consensus building tools, which I'll explain in a little bit, to develop and evaluate proposals that allows for feedback and for members to voice concerns and offer suggestions for modifications in order to meet all the interests around the table. The proposal is that if after a good faith effort to build consensus in that way, if it appears clear that that's not going to be possible to have complete consensus, then the consortium decisions can be made by majority vote. I think that was actually part of the original charter. This approach is a bit more time consuming. I mean, there's a subcommittee or subgroup that's already been doing some work, for example, on the developing some recommendations for you all to consider. And then we'll spend some more time going through those today. But the opportunity to build sort of broader buy-in and durability around these decisions is one that Heck and the executive leadership team also feel like it's the time spent is worth the outcome in terms of building in more nuance or building more nuanced solutions and finding a space where everybody can live with the outcome. So we'll get a couple chances to do that today. Next slide. We're already doing. There's some tools we can use for building consensus that just helps kind of create a process to work through people's interests and concerns and challenges. And one way to do that is with these red, yellow, and green cards, which you'll find in front of you. So if when a proposal is on the table, such as the one that was up there a minute ago, we can put that back up. What each member gets an opportunity to do is to hold up a green card, a yellow card, or a red card. Green card means that works for me. I can live with that particular statement or proposal, and I'm good to go. Yellow card means it's okay, but I've got some concerns I'd like to talk about, and I'm not necessarily opposing it, but I think there's some ways to make it better, maybe, or some way to address an interest that I have. And then the third sort of option is to put out a red card. And that means I've got an actual problem with this, and I really would like to see a change, or potentially see a change in it, and I want to talk about it. So if you put up the sort of corollary to this is but the follow on is that if you put up a yellow or red card, you have to explain what your concern is and what your pause is, and offer an alternative, offer a solution that you think will meet the needs of others at the table, but also fix it from your perspective to meet your interests. You can also just stand aside if it's just not that important to you. You can sort of abstain altogether, but the red, yellow, and green cards offer an opportunity to hear voices around the table and make adjustments to the proposal as we go along. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, so we're going to try practicing this on the actual decision-making approach. So, we can go back. There we go. No, perfect. So as we go back to this, so everyone wants to pull out their red, yellow, and green cards. Take a moment to digest this proposed decision-making approach. It will be embodied into the charter. And then hopefully somebody will have at least a yellow card. We can practice.
I wish green was more enthusiastic rather than I can just live with it.
Well, it can be. You're welcome to bring enthusiasm behind the green card.
You can stand up.
You're right. That's how you deploy the card. Exactly. Just as an aside, so when we work with big groups, we often encourage people, if they want to get in the queue for a discussion, to put their card up like that. So it's kind of an unobtrusive way to get it. But we also say, if you really need to get in, cut the line to comment on a particular thing, you can waive yours. But if people waive their cards too much, we just put them away. All right, red, yellow, green. So here's the proposal. If you feel like this is the best thing ever, or you can just live with it, then hold out a green card. If you have a concern you want to address, you have a suggestion you want to make it better, then hold up a yellow card. And if you've got a real problem with it, then hold up a red card. All right, ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, good. We have a yellow card. All right, so all greens except for the yellow card here. So Melissa, what? I'm going to pass you the mic. because-
When you pitched this decision-making methodology, you stated that for the yellow and red card, you should offer a solution. And I think that's a good encouragement, but I wouldn't want someone's objection and lack of a proposed solution to stifle their willingness to offer their concern. So I would suggest that be modified such that if you have a concern, a yellow or red concern, you raise it, even if you don't know how to solve the problem.
I'm open to it.
Right.
Fair enough. All right, so with that modification on the table, I don't think there are any other yellow cards today. All right, let's do it again. As modified to not discourage people from raising concerns, even if they don't have a solution. Let's see the cards. Green, 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 green. All right, all green around the table. There, you made your first consensus-based decision.
I have to confess, it's too easy a problem.
Yeah, right. Well, the next one may be more challenging. A little bit more complexity and depth coming up. So with that, I think I turn it back over to Jennifer or to the subcommittee. Are you kicking it off?
I'm not, but I can.
Thank you. So we're moving into the point of the agenda where we're going to hear from the folks that participated in the funding work group over the last month or so. And Venkat and Dr. Nagy both volunteered or were voluntold. I'm not sure which, but they are going to walk us through both the process and the recommendations. I do want to draw your attention. You have the slides in your packet. You also have a copy of the memo that was shared with you in advance that outlines those recommendations as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Venkat.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the Technology Industry Consortium is advising on $10 million of the remaining ARPA funds for the Workforce Ready grant funding that will advance high-tech workforce skills and occupations, specifically careers in technology. So we're looking at funding the round 3 requests for applications here. And these funds are to be obligated by December of this year and spent by December of 26. And the recommendations we said could include how many RFAs we want and what the funding amounts for each should be, what their focus needs to be, and if there's any additional criteria that needs to be considered. The working group itself, next slide, please. So thank you to all of these people who participated in the work group. We had 2 meetings. I attended the first one, and I just want to walk you through the process that was considered. Next slide, please. So on the first meeting, which was on February 6th, we developed these guiding principles and gave some initial recommendation options. And I think the healthcare and manufacturing ones were slightly ahead of us, if I remember correctly, Jennifer, or healthcare was slightly ahead of us. Okay. And then we decided on what those guiding principles for the RFAs should be, and we finalized recommendations in the second meeting. In the first meeting, I believe we came up with 3 recommendations for RFAs. And then the second meeting, which I didn't attend, which Dr. Nagy will speak to, I believe they narrowed it down to 1 broader RFA. And then the recommendations we want to finalize in this meeting today. And finally, the release of the RFAs would happen in April. Next slide, please. So these are the guiding principles that were formed based on discussions with all of you in previous meetings. And we went through this in the funding work groups as well. So the first one was the focus on broad transferable tech skills. And then we wanted to prioritize projects that create new pathways and build awareness for priority populations to access these tech skills, along with education and training that lead to high wage jobs and careers. And we want to consider upskilling and reskilling as a key strategy for incumbent worker advancement. The fourth bullet considers costs and benefits of scaling existing programs versus investing in new programs. And I just wanted to add here that it's not to say that we don't want to invest in new programs, particularly if they're innovative new programs. And I think we should consider those. And then prioritizing projects that leverage funding and demonstrating the sustainability of investment. And finally, unique regional workforce needs. And demonstrating how we address industry need or recognize credentials. And just as a refresher, in the next slide, we talked about what those skills are. And this was based off the data we received from our employment department, the survey that the Technology Association of Oregon conducted, and our surveys here among the consortiums. These are some of the skills that, to recap, is what we were essential to focus on. So I won't go through all of them, but I'm just listing them out here for you to review. And with that, I think what I'd like to do is pass it over to Dr. Nagy, and he will talk to us about the recommendations that came out from the second working group meeting, the funding working group.
Thank you, Venkat. Welcome to Oregon Tech. Sorry, I wasn't here at the beginning of the meeting to welcome you to campus. Nice to have all of you here. So as far as the recommendations, the first round of Workforce Ready grant funding, as Venkat mentioned, was competitively awarded across healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. And the first one's focus, as the slide says, was on capacity building. The second one was also offered across those three topics: healthcare, manufacturing, and technology. It was focused on expanding partnerships. It was focused on directly serving students, training participants, and job seekers. So in the third round, HEC is going to competitively award $10 million for projects and programs that address Oregon's that address Oregon's high-tech workforce needs. So that is the focus of this third round. As Venkat mentioned, we did start with three different options. One was to upskill, the other one was to bring in new talent or attract new talent. The third option was to really kind of creating a separate option to prioritize underserved populations. That was kind of the initial conversation, but we felt the last one should be part of the first two anyway. Why separate it out as we are creating these new options? And then I want to compliment Sarah Foster, if I recall her name correctly. She did a great job of facilitating this. And the group felt and came together, really, we should be one option so we don't keep subdividing it, making it harder for people to seek these opportunities and create effectiveness. So as you see, is one RFA. So we are recommending HEC run one RFA for $10 million with two distinct tracks. But then it is not as though people have to pick, the applicants have to pick one or the other. One is to attract new talent in and expand the opportunities. The other one is upskilling and reskilling incumbent workers. Because the discussion went, if somebody has the infrastructure and the ability to upskill and reskill, why would you prevent them from giving opportunities for people that want to come in the first place, right? So that is why you see two tracks, but then applications can address one or both tracks if they so choose. But again, we talked about broad transferable technology skills. I do want to talk about some of the additional criteria, which is rendered succinctly within the green box there. One is HEC should not limit the RFA to a particular industry sector or sectors or pure tech employment, while also not penalizing applications that are specific to a particular industry sector. This may seem a little odd the way it reads, but we really had good conversations around this, because on one hand, we are trying to create a lot of regional impacts. In a certain region, the focus may be one particular sector. And so at that time, they should not be penalized saying you cannot focus on a sector because that's a region that's what is trying to serve. I think I might have given the example of healthcare, just as an example in rural Oregon and Klamath Falls. There is one big employer in the hospitals. Their needs in terms of transferable skills may be worth driving the project, but they shouldn't be punished. And I just coincidentally got a call from Northeast Portland, from the Hermiston area. They cannot find enough water irrigation engineers. I mean, so there are regional focuses that could make them apply around a sector. That's why don't make it sector specific or don't penalize if somebody applies with a sector in mind. The second one is the HEC should prioritize proposals that are creating new pathways, including career exploration and awareness for priority populations to access technology skills, education, and training. So this is to encourage new pathways only, not what we have done before. The third one is should prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships with employers and show how the education and training program responds to an industry need or recognized credential. And one of the appendages to this is HEC should provide examples in the RFA about how to do this. And my editorial comment is well-intended examples should be carefully chosen so that they don't become the constraint, because it is unfair to expect a team that is writing the RFA to think of everything and be open, be able to think of what people would think in applying for it. The important, another criterion is HEC should prioritize proposals that articulate a sustainability plan. How would they move forward and continue to do this? And we also want HEC provide examples in this. The last one is HEC should prioritize proposals that provide culturally specific and responsive education and training programs, including wraparound support. So those are some of the criteria that go into supporting these recommendations. Again, one RFA, 2 tracks, but they don't have to be only in one of those 2 tracks. And those are some of the additional criteria here. With that, I will turn it back to Turner. We will see the magic of the green, yellow, and red.
All right. Well, first, any questions, sort of clarifying questions before we get to card waving? Melissa.
I was curious in the context of underserved populations, is that both geographical as well as diversity related?
Sure. I was just curious on the definition of, I think it was underserved populations that was used in the proposal, to understand what that meant.
Actually, the discussion was around prioritized populations. So my understanding would be you can prioritize it based on a regional need, geography, as well as traditionally the underserved population. That would be my interpretation. I'll give it to you.
I'll tell you what the law says.
Well, it's what they love.
So Senate Bill 1545, which guides our work, defines priority populations to include 10 groups, including communities of color, women, rural and frontier communities. So geography is captured, low income communities, individuals from Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes, veterans, individuals with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ plus community, individuals who experience discrimination on the basis of age. Oh, and incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals from
on your ability to recite that.
My team makes me look really smart. So when we talk about prioritizing communities, those are the 10 communities that are identified in the Future Ready Oregon statute.
Gotcha.
And all of the programs must center the needs of those communities.
Couple more questions
I'd rather not assume, so sustainability in this context.
Sustainability is typically standing for your ability to pay for those programming going forward, so that it doesn't have to be regular and periodic funding from the government to continue programming. I welcome other comments from other members of the team there.
Just a quick clarification. I know we call out priority populations for the career awareness and advancement, but is priority populations also a target in the upskilling and reskilling of incumbent workers?
I can clarify that it is a requirement of all of the funding.
Just one more clarifying question. So it stated rural and frontier. What does frontier refer to, if not rural?
Now you're testing me. It has to do.
And someone will throw something at me if I get this wrong. We use the OHSU Office of Rural Health definition of rural frontier. It's zip code based, and it's based on the population per square mile.
Density.
Population density per square mile.
So frontier is less dense, more rural.
Yeah. So frontier is less dense and more rural than rural.
Fewer people.
Somewhere in the world. Yeah, exactly.
I just had a quick question, but I'm dying to find out if being from the Oregon coast means I'm from the frontier as well. Can you explain to me the RFA process and who's going to be targeted to make applications for that and where the money is coming from?
The RFA process is that we will release the request for applications, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but that will come out in probably April timeframe. And we will accept applications. The criteria are informed by the decisions that you're making here today. And then, the funding. So we have a balance of about $40 million in ARPA funds that were invested through Future Ready Oregon, and 10, I almost gave you more money. 10 million is being informed by the Technology Industry Consortia and will be technology focused. Healthcare, the healthcare funding is 18 million and the manufacturing funding is 12. Yes.
Well, the applicants for this RFA will be educational providers.
Thank you. So, and we reviewed the statute at our last meeting, so I would refer folks to the meeting materials from last time, but the eligible applicants include community-based organizations and workforce service providers. And those are defined in the statute. Community-based organizations includes culturally specific organizations, and workforce service providers includes organizations that provide workforce services, including career coaching, education and training, and a number of other things. Is that helpful? Okay, super. I was restating that for the folks online too.
All right, I've got Dr. Bull and then.
Thank you. So I had a question when I put this up, and now I actually have two questions. Maybe I'll ask them both. The first is the $2 million. Is there any guidance, and maybe this is in the materials that you referred to earlier, around what size the awards will be? I mean, is it just people can apply for whatever amount? Or is there sort of recommendation, sort of how many awards are you anticipating this would lead to? And should I ask my second question?
Yeah.
No.
Get them all out.
My question is, have we considered a different term besides frontier? I suspect that lands differently with the non-tribes than it does for folks from non-native backgrounds.
I think those are great questions for discussion here amongst the group. So I would welcome responses. The frontier is what is used in the statute and what the Office of Rural Health uses, but appreciate the attention to the importance of words. The other question on amounts. So the 10 million is total. One of the things the funding work group considered was whether or not to assign certain amounts to different buckets within the RFA. I'm happy to have folks from the work group talk about that conversation and hear from you all about guidance for the awards amount recommendations.
We did talk about it early on, but then we did not conclude on the conversation. I believe the first round of awards went with relatively smaller amounts, 200, 300,000 when we did the initial set of awards. And then in the second round, there were more monies allocated to the same applicants, perhaps, that competed for the second round. But in this case, there is no next round. So here is the $10 million, but we did talk about briefly, but we did not conclude that again. To some extent, as we all know in our worlds, when we apply even to National Science Foundation, they ask you to scale the grants back later, depending on the number of awards they wish to make and so forth. To some extent, you could look at interest and reserve the right to have the folks rework the scope of work and the magnitudes instead of putting artificial constraints up front. But some max would be helpful so you don't get mega proposals and then you don't know what to do with them.
And I can affirm that the maximum award in the first round was 300,000. The maximum award in the second round, I believe, was 3 million. And the size of awards is reflected on the project lists that are available online. I can certainly share that with folks. Was there more conversation though about dollar amounts before we move to the next question?
Thank you.
So I think the only thing I would say is some guidance of sort of range. You gave the example of NSF. Well, yeah, that's true. There's some negotiation that happens, but you don't submit a $5 million proposal for an NSF career award where it's going to be around $500,000. And what you can do for that amount, people might think differently about it if they had some guidance of what the anticipated number of awards would be versus thinking, oh, I can come in and ask for $3 million when we're really thinking it might be around $100,000.
I just had a clarifying question on the, we talked about technology skills. The question that keeps coming up whenever we have these workforce discussion is the emphasis on the human skills or the soft skills. I'm wondering if that will be part of the RFA process or the consideration process. And I don't know what we decided on that.
I'm going to encourage you to.
Yeah, someone from the committee to work through.
I can start others.
I think we largely relied upon the survey results. We really did not discuss it a whole lot. And for example, that includes CRM. It talks about even somewhat very broad engineering. What does that mean, right? But I thought there was enough space in that UX design that is not entirely a mechanical process. It considers the human elements. So I think it was enough flexibility there. And when we are already saying it should be broadly transferable skills, we don't want to get so many constraints added to it, then people they don't know which way to move. So I think these lists that I believe TAO put together, right, in the survey, I thought it is broad enough for people to participate. If any, we don't want to separate human skills and more technical skills. We are trying to create more of blends in workforce.
But certainly opening that up for conversation, that could be something that we consider.
Kevin. Are you same? Yeah, okay. You can wait here. See this one.
Yeah, we did talk though about like on the job training, like work-based learning as part of one of the ways to upskill and reskill. I don't know I don't know where it ended up, but we did talk about that in the committee quite a bit as something that was important.
So when we get to the red, yellow, green part, folks can, as we get some clarification around what is and what isn't sort of articulated in the proposal, folks can raise the yellow card and say, how about we add this or something like that if you want to address one of these issues we're clarifying now.
So I had one thing, but now I have three. So here we go. First of all, I will check on Frontier. So I can't speak on behalf of OHSU. We do have a published publicly inclusive language guide, and I can check internally to find if that's ever been raised as something that we're considering. Obviously, we can't do anything about the statute that we're following in that language, but it is something that I can look into. Secondly, on this last one, it is something that I definitely, these skills that we're listing here, it's going to be really helpful, I think, to elaborate a lot on those. So people are not, like when we say CRM, are people understanding what that is and living. I know that's the world we live in, Skip, and we all live in. So, but my question originally when I put the card up was one of the bullets here where we talk about essentially scaling versus new. I'm just wondering, is there any precedence or for previous awards where there's been a rubric or something established to help make decisions? Or is it, because I read this as kind of an area of tension in the way that it's written. And I think you called it out as such when you're describing it, but I'm just wondering, is there something that as people are making the award that we should be providing input on how to level set, or again, there's a precedence or norm that's been applied for the previous rounds that would be followed?
It's a great question. I think I
want to provide some clarity about the guiding principles. So the guiding principles were developed by you all to help guide the work of the funding work group. So those are things that the funding work group considered, and they left open in what they're recommending for you all to consider today. If there needs to be further conversation about whether or not we prioritize new versus existing at this table, we can do that. But the funding work group's recommendations were to remain open. Did you want to speak to that? I don't know. Okay.
Any other questions, clarification? All right.
I know you're going to ask us to do the green, yellow, and red, and I still have an issue with Frontier, but it's in the bill. It's not in this language, so I think I'm okay with what's proposed here is what I would say.
Great. Yes, and you're right. The red, yellow, green operation does loom large. So for those folks who just came in and may not have missed the first round, we have a way of building consensus around a particular proposal, and it includes the use of these red, yellow, and green cards, which should be at your desk there. green card means a green card means that you either really like the proposal, if you're a cat, and or you can live with it, that it's fine the way it is. Yellow card indicates, well, I'm kind of okay with it, but I have some concerns I'd like to have addressed, and I'm going to raise them with you all, and if possible, offer a proposal to change it. And then finally, if you have some serious concerns or problem, you display a red card, and that your obligation primarily is to explain what your concern is, and then work with folks to try to come up with a solution that meets everyone else's needs as well as yours. Does that make sense? For those, okay. All right. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no.
I just wanted to mention, we've had a couple of folks come into the room. Since we did introductions, it looks like we've also had some folks join online. I think I mentioned at the opening of the meeting that we do have a handful of members who are either ill or traveling today and asked if they could join online for the voting. So I wonder if we might just want to let the new folks introduce themselves, and then maybe Ronan can identify who members that have logged in online. We're running well ahead of schedule, so we have a little bit of time for that.
Great. Yes. Are there others, Ronan, that we don't have cards for?
No.
Okay. So I'll let our two new arrivals introduce themselves, and then I'll mention who else is joining.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Dowdy. I'm from the Warm Springs Community Action Team. I'm the Technology Workforce Manager there. So I guess what I do is I kind of run the program for a lot of the technology implementing and creating internships for technology, creating internships for management. So far, I've been partnering with a bunch of companies and doing a whole bunch of boring admin work like MOUs, employment contracts, all that fun stuff. And, also advertising and trying to recruit members. So that's kind of what I do.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley Espinoza. I'm the Executive Director of Lane Workforce Partnership, which is the home of the Ducks, by the way. We've been working with the tech sector in our sector partnership since 2014, and specifically with the Technology Association of Oregon. It's been a really strong partnership. Through that partnership, we got direct flights to the Eugene Airport. Uber and Lyft came into the community. We also got Hive Fiber, all in the downtown corridor, and really mobilized the rural broadband that we're doing. And so, and then TO has just been a really great partner and bringing industry along and throwing good parties.
Important. Then in addition to the four folks I previously introduced online, we were joined by Corinne Bouchard, hopefully I got that name right, recruiting lead at BIAMP, and Faye, the executive director at Encode XP. So those folks are online and listening. There's not a really good method for engaging verbally with us, but they're tracking a lot. Okay. So the proposal is on the table. You have it on the sheet in front of you in greater detail than the slide that was up there before. So how are people feeling? Let's pull out the red, yellow, green cards and take the temperature of the room here. Sure. Yeah, we can go back to so the proposal is, hopefully I'll get this all correct, one RFA with two distinct tracks, both a career advancement, upskilling and reskilling incumbent workers, and a recruitment track, expanding education and training programs for transferable tech skills. There's an overall criteria, and it can be both, I guess I should say. So it's two tracks, but you can, a single applicant can be, aiming at both tracks. The additional criteria, which are definitely in more detail on the sheet that you have than they are up here, but broad transferable skills, sector specific or geography specific too. I think there was some mention of that. It's better. I don't have that in front of me right at the moment to articulate it better, but it is on the sheet. Career exploration and awareness, both employer partnerships that show how the training program responds to an industry need or recognized credential. Clearly articulated sustainability plan. So we had some clarification on that earlier. It means basically this isn't going to be a one and done kind of thing. It's more like looking to see that the investment here will be able to perpetuate and the program will continue. Culturally specific and responsive programming and wraparound support. So all that kind of stuff we've talked about before. Any questions? Any final clarification questions before we poll?
You want the amendment
Well, we haven't had amendments yet. That would come with the yellow cards that come up. Because mostly clarifications, although I suspect there might be a couple of amendments about, for example, an application grant cap or whatever amount, for example. All right, so let's start, because this gives us an organized way to kind of account for proposals and hear them articulated. All right, yeah, the question.
Well, more just a comment. I just wanted to build on what I heard. Oh, sorry.
I have a comment. I wanted to build on what I heard Kevin say. It's just we'll have to be really thoughtful about how we articulate these specific skills and including, Venkat's observation about those employability skills. So these one-line bullets may not be sufficient to really help applicants understand what we're thinking about. And I worry that we may not hit the mark. The applicants could come in with proposals that are more universal, workforce development skills, for instance, as opposed to being very thoughtful about the particular occupational and employability skills that we're thinking about. So I guess it's just a point to be really thoughtful about how we describe those so they have the information they need.
Anyone have thoughts about how to do it? Yeah.
And maybe I'm thinking of the two different tracks with upskilling and reskilling. Are we assuming that some of those soft skills or employability skills have already been achieved? So it may be less important on that track than it would be on the expanding programs and awareness. That's a question. I don't know the group that had that discussion, but or if it's in all.
Dr. Nagy answer and then answer.
I think upskilling and reskilling doesn't have to be only in soft skills. It may be part of it. But then we did talk about there are always, I think one of the examples even I might have brought up for discussion, those reskillings changes with times. Many years ago, I used to work with UAW in Detroit, and keyboard literacy was one of the things that was being promoted. I'm showing my age now. So 30 years ago, 25 years ago. But it is not because they wanted them to become computer experts. They wanted them to get comfortable operating the controllers for quality control purposes. Your ability to get comfortable with buttons and keys was kind of the driving element, not so much becoming a computer expert per se. So I think there is always psychology involved, not just, even though it's a technical training, there were other components that get embedded in these things.
Yeah, just more of a comment. Oregon used to have this fund called the Employer Workforce Training Fund, which was dedicated to incumbent workers. Skip, you may remember this. And it was a really innovative way to align current needs, current employer needs in the educational system, because employers would apply directly for this fund to upskill their workers. And I'm just wondering if anyone had considered that fund as a mechanism to think about how to offer incumbent worker training, because to me, that was a really great way to scale this stuff.
and to really encourage partnerships amongst companies to address current needs, but then also to think about how do we backfill once we're moving people up. So there's a really good example, and I would encourage the HEC to have a look at how that fund was structured, because I think it was very successful. It just ran out of money.
Thanks.
Sorry, you're probably getting tired of coming over. I guess in terms of thinking about whether to propose an amendment to this or not, a question I would have, I think a little bit of clarity around the process might be helpful. Am I understanding this correctly, that these guidelines or what's in this document, then we'll go to HEC. HEC will write an RFA for this and we'll manage all that process. And I guess the question I would have for this group is, well, do we want to provide any guidance on the size and number of awards, or is that something we entirely want to leave up to the next group? You could imagine we've identified these two tracks, one that's primarily around upskilling and reskilling, one that's sort of new pathways. It seems like we would want at least 2 awards, but do we want to say something else about sort of the number of awards we would envision this might lead to?
I have a question around awards. Is there a consideration around awards already distributed through Future Ready Oregon geographically when looking at continuing funding, having these rollouts? Because if it's inequitably being distributed, or if, for example, Far East doesn't have the capacity that Portland has, no, just kidding, Andrew. But you know what I mean? Like, what does that look like? So just being aware, I guess, of what the spread has been would be interesting.
That's available online, where the awards went geographically.
I just want to talk a little bit. One of the things I think that is great about this proposal is focusing on broad transferable technology skills that benefit all sectors. Did the work group consider what type of certification might come out of the training of this that would then allow them to be transferable from company to company, or some type, what is the recognition of having achieved those skills that are broadly transferable?
Please go ahead.
We did talk about that, and the way that we tried to think about that was the one criteria that explains that the partnerships will show how the training program responds to a specific industry need or a credential. But we were really trying to get at your point. We want those credentials that have that currency with employers, so that we can assure the folks getting the training that these actually are valued and important credentials. So that was the way we tried to address it.
Right. Looking around, don't see any cards up. Any other questions or clarifications? All right. Okay, let's see where we're at.
Can I say one thing? I got a text from somebody online that they wanted to know how they vote because the chat is disabled. So are the people online voting?
Ronan will explain.
So unfortunately, we don't possess a means to have online attendees participate in the consensus building exercise, as Turner has referenced. But when we officially move to approve these funding recommendations, I'm going to ask all consortium members online to post whether they abstain, reject, or approve these funding recommendations in the Q&A. So they will see it online, as well as hearing me talk about it right now.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Oh,
sorry. I just want to go back because there was a question thrown out about whether number of awards or, and I don't want to lose that track. And maybe that's, I'm not the one running the process, but I mean, you very clearly asked us the question of, are there other folks who are interested in, and I believe it was size of a number of awards. And then the question of whether or not understanding of the process in general downstream, I'm trying to go back and make sure I'm capturing it, but knowing that information, how does that then cause or lead to the rest of us saying, yes, that is something that is important or not? So I didn't want to lose that track. You asked it, so.
Thank you.
So I guess, yes, one suggestion would be as we go around and look for proposed changes for it, that someone can offer a suggestion. If you'd like more information from HEC, perhaps about some guidance from them on what might be appropriate given this amount that we're distributing and where we are in the future ready process, then I mean, Jennifer, I don't know if you want to offer anything like that, or if folks are interested in hearing that. Otherwise, then I would suggest that that someone make a proposal, and then we can have some discussion around it and build that in. Does that make sense? Jennifer, I'll let you.
It may be helpful to note a couple of things. The healthcare recommendations were finalized by your counterparts in the Healthcare Industry Consortia late last month. They landed on 2 tracks and decided to allocate the funding equally between the 2 tracks. So that's one example. I think it's also important to elevate, you may remember early on in the charter, we addressed the issue of conflict of interest and being sure to sort of keep the conversation here in the recommendation space. So when we talk about process, what you've named is accurate. You all will elevate recommendations today about the criteria for the funding, and then HEC staff will deploy those recommendations in the form of an RFA. And really, I think Venkat, you mentioned it in one of your slides, in the content of your recommendations can include how many RFAs. The recommendation on the table from the work group is 1 RFA, and the funding amounts for each. So by default, with 1 RFA, it would be $10 million for the bucket. And the focus of the RFAs, which is, again, the career advancement and recruitment with the option of identifying a project that does both, and calling out the additional criteria that have been recommended by the work group. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of process. That is what would guide the content of the RFA. And you all are informing those pieces and making recommendations to the HEC. The deeper details of the process is where we really try to keep that separate in terms of conflict of interest and protecting you all and your ability to participate in the work.
I get, yeah, Dr. Knight.
Again, this is just responding to Dr. Bull's comment. I agree there has to be some guidance, otherwise it'll be all over the place. It'll be hard to do. As I have thought about it during the discussions, we are looking for somebody to do something that is sustainable. This is going to be over 2 years, and we need to give sufficient number of awards so people have opportunities. So just as a proposal for all of us to consider, I would say limited to $1 million. That way there'll be at least 10 awards. Obviously, it'll be more than 10 awards. Going back to what Kyle said, in terms of rubric, provide certain paragraphs to which we all have to respond to in terms of criteria, how it addresses all these criteria. So that's in a way a rubric, how you write a proposal. So, and then I'm looking at possibly a 2-year program because it says funds have to be obligated by 24 December and have to be expended by December 26 to do something meaningful that is going to be sustainable. That is where I'm coming up with a limit of $1 million to do something substantive that will have legs going forward. And you can, I believe Oregon Innovation Council looks at now 12 regions, going back to Alicia's comment. 10 proposals gives us an opportunity to spread it around the state. I'm sure it'll be more than 10. So just for a proposal for us to think about.
All right, well, so I suggest that we, sorry.
Going back forth to, right, a certain dollar amount, but I think ultimately what we're trying to do is tie impact to size, right? Because there could be, let's just say hypothetically, there could be a statewide effort that touches all corners that may qualify as being funded at a higher level where smaller projects and so on. I don't know how to wrestle with that, but that's, I don't want to limit creativity and possibility if it could have significant impact in the state. And so I don't know if there's a way to word that, that there's some correlation there. Is that clear?
Well, what, okay.
That's required to correlate with the size of impact.
Right, so what I'm hearing, so I'm gonna consider this all, that we're already like working on a modification to the proposal that has to do with the amount of the, or cap on the size of proposals that are subject to the RFA. So what I've heard is a suggestion that we have a $1 million cap for the various reasons that Dr. Nagi suggested. But my question is to whether that's limiting for a potential program that might be statewide or otherwise worthy, but is for considerably more than $1 million. So thoughts on that, Melissa?
Yeah, I was just going to offer that maybe you specify a cap of $1 million for the regions, if it is a regional program that, you know, that you mentioned there are regions that are defined. And so if it will only affect a region, the cap is $1 million. But if it is a statewide application, then it would not have a cap.
So I think to kind of piggyback on what Melissa just said, for me, it's not as much as saying it's 1 million or lower, or setting an exact amount, but having something like regionally, these would be the ideal, or these would be the recommend, but others would be considered. And I'm thinking of this less from speaking on behalf of OHSU or what we do there, but coming from consulting, where it's the worst when you submit something and find out there's no chance because you're wildly off in your dollars and out of alignment with the actual value that would be delivered. And so to me, softening the language to say this is the ideal outcome, but not necessarily that it's here's a number and region or statewide that it has to be at that level or below. So.
I'm going to maybe encourage us to get a little bit up out of the weeds and think more about the potential of allocating the 10 million differently across the one RFA. What I hear you saying is the importance of providing guidance around award amounts, and that could be something that we can include in additional criteria. I think you'll see in your memo, it does indicate, for example, prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships. HEC should provide examples in the RFA about how to do this. Prioritize proposals that have clearly articulated a sustainability plan. HEC should provide examples in the RFA about how to do this. This might be another example of either the sustainability plan or adding an additional criteria. The size of awards, and HEC should provide examples or guidance around size of award, as opposed to getting maybe more in the weeds about process and the awards themselves, which moves us into outside of the scope of the recommendations for this group.
So what I'm hearing, Jennifer, is you're suggesting that this group not offer specific guidance on a cap, for example, on award amounts, thank you. But rather allow this conversation to inform HEC and allow HEC to provide some context in the application materials or the RFA materials that go out that capture this sense of we're not looking for one $10 million grant necessarily, but we are looking for grants that where there's no solid cap there or on the amount. There is the value matches with the amount, I guess.
I think what I'm hearing is adding something to the additional criteria.
I think what I'm hearing is that the proposal is to add something to the additional criteria. And I was suggesting there's some language in the recommendations already that might help inform that. If that helps
We'll need a
frame for folks.
suggestion.
We will need suggestions.
All right. Maybe some of you are prepared to make that kind of suggestion. One or more of you. All right. Any other questions at this point? So my suggestion is that we do a round of polling. We see who has specific suggestions for modifications, and we go through those and address them one by one and either add them or not to the proposal that's on the table. Does that make sense? We'll start making some of these questions and swirl around it a little more concrete with getting particular suggestions. Does that sound good? And then we'll take a break as soon as we're done with that. And we'll close out so I don't want to lose the thread here. Everybody's kind of engaged in it, but we are due for a break. All right. Excuse me. Let's take a look at the cards. So red, yellow, or green. Green is as it is. You could live with it, or you're really enthusiastic about it. Or yellow is I've got a suggestion I want to put on the table to address a concern. Or excuse me. Or a red card is I've got a real problem and we need to have a big conversation about it. All right, let's see the cards.
What are we again lifting the cards for? Just as presented on.
As is, yes. Sorry.
Without the modifications that have been discussed, yeah. And as a reminder, the full recommendations are spelled out in the memo that's in your packet.
Right, yeah, the memo has got a lot more detail than one slide. Particularly on additional criteria. All right. Cards, please. Yellows over here. Yellow. Okay, so got some work to do. Why don't we start with Dr. Bull? The yellow card, you've been articulate on the subject.
Yes, I'll try not to take too much time, and I want to thank the folks who worked on this. This is a really nice proposal, and I like it. I think the one thing I would add is something around high level guidance of the number of awards there should be some guidance around the size of the award, and I'm fine with leaving it up to the HEC folks who implement this, but I think there should be some thought about how to maximize the impact of the $10 million is, I guess, all I would say. And that could be a single line that sort of addresses some of the comments we've heard already.
On that topic, does anybody have a further suggestion or modification on how to articulate that in the RFA proposal?
How has something similar been done in other RFAs?
Question was, how has it been done in other RFAs?
It's sort of getting into the evaluation criteria. I think really what you all need to articulate is whether or not you want one bucket or you want smaller buckets of funding to be allocated to each of these in terms of the investment. Outside of the additional I really want to push you to the additional criteria section as a space where you can be thinking about how you would articulate that. So we already have prioritized projects that demonstrate partnerships and respond to industry need, and prioritize proposals that have a clearly articulated sustainability plan. And I would encourage you, again, to think about funding in terms of, do you want to divide the funding or prioritize the funding between the categories that have been identified?
So what I'm hearing is that it's going to be challenging for this group to dive down deep into specific maximum caps or amounts, because that's turf that becomes challenging for you all in terms of conflicts of interest. And so keeping it as high level as possible, one way to do that is to use buckets to divide up the overall grant opportunity. So Melissa.
Well, on that specifically, I think the recommendation of the work group was to not provide it. And I would honor that recommendation.
I will say ditto. Yeah, I think that is some, those criteria, to me, they inform the rubrics on the sections that have to be addressed in the proposal. They are not really amenable to be separated into buckets, you know. That is where we talked about it at length in the breakout rooms too.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What if all the proposals are only in one area? Let's say, for example, all the proposals come in career advancement because we haven't specified, which means none of these dollars would be going to expanding educational and training programs, which I think we've identified as a need around that career awareness. And so possibly a solution would be to say, some threshold of, no more than 70% will be awarded in one of the tracks, as a way to hope that we get people applying.
That legit?
That is, yes, that is informing, I'm gonna use the word, informing the funding amount for each focus area.
Focus area, okay. All right, so what?
Just in a response to that, when we talked about in our group, was really including that career exploration and awareness as a criteria in all of the programs. So even if it was upskilling or reskilling incumbent works, there would be some communication, exploration, awareness activities included in the proposal.
I've heard proposal, specific proposal, informed by that, but still on the table that 70%, that no more than 70%. Is it? Let's have just quickly. Anybody have any discussion or comment on that? That could be a way to address kind of some of the concerns we've heard. So it's no more than 70% going into any one particular track or distinct track. So it's sort of nudging funding towards the other track, even if there's a lot of enthusiasm for one over the other. I see you ready to deploy.
Just generically, what I'm hearing is respondents want a level of clarity so that they know they're not wasting their time. So it's clear what we're expecting from a respondent. So I think anything that heck can add to those additional criteria to help clarify what's expected of people and create some parameters so people aren't wasting their time and or missing the boat, I think would be helpful.
And I expect there's a fair amount of context that's provided with the RFA. I don't know, I've never actually looked at an RFA, but in addition to just the things that are written on this page, there'll be a fair amount of information about how the entities should apply.
It is related to the 70%. So we say career advancement, recruitment, and we say both. So if we say 70%, how does both factor into that?
I think what I heard is no more than 70% in either career advancement or recruitment.
Right.
And so both would be 50-50? If something is sorry,
Right, no.
So
If someone turns in something and it's, $3 million and it's both, so that's 1.5 of one and 1.5 of the other, correct?
unless otherwise specified.
We're in the weeds, but I'm just trying to understand, like because the 70%, I really like that as a suggestion, again, to help provide more clarity and also drive more diversity and responses for where they're addressing need. And so just knowing if I'm going to hold up a green card, what my 70% green is for or against.
Couldn't you just, if it's both, put a check box of mark in both boxes? It doesn't need to be split, does it?
I was just going to share a comment that the fact that we have called out both in there is implicitly inviting applications that favor both career advancement as well as recruitment. So I don't know if it is necessary for us to specify a threshold. Just a comment.
And Kat just articulated some of what I was thinking about. I wondered, well, what if we only got recruitment? Then that could be a little challenging. I'm just picking one as an example. But I also wonder if we're complicating things with the words two distinct tracks. It feels like what we're really saying is, one RFA with a focus on career advancement and recruitment, or it could be both. So I'm wondering if maybe they're going to be a little fungible, in any, which is the both category, I guess. And I just think I worry about saying a specific number without being able to really appreciate the focus of all of them. And so anyway, what Venkat said.
All right. So where we're at, as far as I know, is we still have a proposal on the table to allocate, to suggest that no more than 70% of grants go into one of these two, as it's currently worded, distinct tracks. So why don't we take a poll on that first, and we'll see where that goes, and then we'll address. If we're still stuck on this one issue, we may have to look at a little bit. Let me ask this: does anyone have a different issue that we need to work on with this, or are we all about this one thing? If we're successful in resolving this issue around amounts, caps, allocation between the two tracks, if we were to resolve all that, does anyone else have another? So let's assume that's resolved for a minute. Let me see the cards, red, yellow, or green, if you have a different concern. So this is all resolved, which it's not yet, but we can work on it. Okay, not seeing any other yellow cards. So this is the one issue we need to sort. So right now there's sort of two proposals out here. One is a 70% soft, sort of a soft capital, saying this is that at least no more than 70% can go into either one of the distinct tracks. And the counter proposal is that basically leave it as it is and that it's kind of fungible. So
What are we lifting the cards for?
we're going to lift cards for the 70%. If can you remember, this is where we get into the can you live with it part. See that? It may not be like your ideal solution, but you can live with it because it's okay. So consensus doesn't mean everybody gets exactly what they want, but consensus is something that everybody can live with at least. So with that in mind, the proposal is language is included that suggests that not more than 70% of the grants can fall into any one of the two distinct tracks, with the tracks that with proposals that address both being counted as sort of 50-50. And that's the current proposal. Does everyone understand the current what's currently on the table? Okay. All right, let's see cards. Yeah, yellow or green. Do you live with it? Okay. Wait, our proposal person has a yellow. That's not supposed to happen.
Playing devil's advocate. So part of it was trying to put,
Part of it was playing devil's advocate a bit to put out consideration that not all the money ends up in one bucket. And I think we have consensus on that. And so whatever wording we have to recommend, that awarding recognizes that we want to see funding projects in these 2 or 3 areas. So I'm not stuck on the 70%, but that was putting that out as a way to possibly get some discussion on better wording resolution. So I kind of like Kyle's, I think, where it's not a hard 70%, but some direction around both tracks are addressed.
Are both tracks addressed simply by the fact that the RFA requests for both?
yeah, I'm trying to make sure that, sorry.
It may be obvious, but if all the proposals or majority of the proposals come in career advancement and there's just a few in recruitment, that all the money doesn't end up in career advancement with nothing on recruitment if there happen to be no both. So I just because we've identified these 2 areas, I want to make sure we have projects that are dealing with career advancement and recruitment, not necessarily together. They don't have to be, they could be. I just don't want to lose something that we've said is important.
Dr. Scari's points are well taken. But I think it goes back to what Kyle said. Maybe the mistake we made is saying 2 distinct tracks. Drop that. And by saying, here are the areas you can address in your proposal. So.
I'd agree with that. I think what we could do is just say 1 RFA with tracks that include. That might satisfy Kyle.
Let's see if it satisfies them.
So I think that may address it. I think the thing that I'm hearing, and my concern is I think we don't want, and I would hope this wouldn't be the case and the HEC would implement it in a way that this doesn't happen, but we don't want probably to have, one $10 million proposal that only addresses one piece of this be what gets funded. And we probably don't want to have, $100,000 proposals that don't have enough funds to actually move the needle on things. And we want to sort of cover most of the areas that are in this. So I wonder if, just something very high level and additional criteria that says, for guidance, because the additional criteria are sort of guidance to, and this is our opportunity. I think if you know, once all this went through, if it were one $10 million proposal that got funded, we'd be like, well, we should have done something to say that's not really what we wanted. You know, so I wonder if an additional criteria that says, you know, heck should prioritize a distribution of the funds or grant size or whatever to fund it, to maximize the impact in those two areas that were identified as sort of themes. I wonder if that would be I'm sorry, that's not articulated very well, but.
So what I heard was heck shall prioritize awards to maximize the impact in both areas specified in the RFA. So really emphasizing to heck that you all want stuff in both categories, not just one or the other. And they're not two distinct tracks in that sense. They're just two areas of interest. So what I hear as a proposal on the table is to modify the recommendation to remove the distinct tracks language and include, wait, somebody said something, a different way of saying that.
Just remove two distinct.
Just remove distinct, okay.
No, two distinct.
Two distinct, okay, oh yes, right, and two.
I heard focus areas.
Focus areas, thank you. Two focus areas that, well, just say focus areas that include those two. And that heck shall prioritize to maximize, you know, shall prioritize to maximize the impact in both these areas. That's what I heard. Is that reflecting? Okay. All right. So with that suggested modification on the table, let's pull out the cards one more time, see where we're at. Don't worry if you've got yellow ones, there's stuff to talk about. Greens. A yellow card. Amy.
Yes, I will do that.
It's not a concern, it's just a clarification. I had how, and this might be too big of a question and too much in the weeds, but how were these areas, not too distinct, these areas settled upon? Is the goal is it because you had like looking at employers' goals to have a plentiful and talented labor force, or is it to address the population that we serve or we want to serve? I mean, it just seems like there are various ways to go about either of those goals, and were they distinguished, or were they made distinct for a reason I'm not understanding?
Does that make sense?
Want to address that? I can't address it.
So if somebody else wants to, yeah.
I will try to answer it, and others who were there, please contribute as well. We were thinking very much about opportunity for the employee. So many opportunities will recruit them into positions. And then the idea we were trying to think about is how do we retain and advance and, you know, prepare those individuals ultimately for other opportunities in the field. So that's how we were thinking about them separately. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah.
I think we were also thinking that actually some of these training are really the same, right? It's a different audience, but it's like how you get them into this opportunity for training. And so if you're building that training, you could actually have both of those audiences in it. It's more of a recruitment into those trainings and less a distinct program necessarily.
That makes sense. All right, let's just to confirm one more round. Let's see the cards. So as modified previously by me, I won't try to say it again virtually. All right, green cards all the way around. Congratulations. You have a set of recommendations. Oh, and yes. We have a consensus recommendation. Now we need to do the actual voting process, right?
So I need a motion to advance recommendations.
I need a motion to advance recommendation as amended. Have a move. I moved over here. Okay. Does anyone abstain from this vote? Or reject?
Are we good online?
I have received one approve from our 6 members. I think online, make it 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5 out of 6.
All right.
No abstention or objection. Okay.
All right. Well, now congratulations, not only have you reached consensus, but you have officially approved a set of recommendations for the next round of workforce study funding grants, opportunity, RFA, whatever. And now it's time for a break. We'll take 10.
We can do 10, yeah.
10 max. So close to 11 as you can get back.
I will introduce Daniel Holbrook. Daniel's joining us from Business Oregon and Oregon's broadband office to talk all things broadband. I heard from you all that you really wanted to better understand the statewide landscape around broadband access as we're talking about access to technology skills and occupations, really wanting to make sure that those jobs and careers are accessible for folks across the state. And I said, yes, and there is a group of folks working really hard on that. And so Daniel's with us today to tell us a little bit more. Daniel's slides did not make it into your packet, but we will make sure to make those available to you in follow-up. So don't go hunting for his slide. Take some good notes, and we'll make sure, though, that you have the content available to you afterwards. So with that, turn it over to Daniel.
Awesome. Good morning. I can hear myself, so I trust everyone can hear me. My name is Daniel Holbrook. I am with Business Oregon, which is the state's economic development department. In case you haven't heard of us, we do some really cool things. And I have a colleague, Jeff, that's in the room. Everything from business recruitment to arts and culture, to infrastructure financing, and also business financing. I'm in a little pocket of the department, and that's the Oregon Broadband Office. And super excited to be here and to talk. But in thinking about talking to you all today to say, here's all the great things that we're doing, I just paused for a moment and thought about my own reflection of history and education. And really reflecting on my family. So my family came to this country in the 60s, and one of the key reasons was the educational opportunities that the United States offered. My mom and my family demonstrated the importance of education and also meeting people where they're at. My mom was an ESL, English as a second language teacher in the Central Valley in California. So I spent a lot of time on weekends seeing people that had need, but also had a hunger for education and to learn more. So those are some of the things that drive me and why I do what I do. There's a lot of people behind me, not literally, but figuratively in the office. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna, first off, I hope that this is interactive at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts or ideas, we are your Oregon Broadband Office. So it's not that we're just in this ivory tower doing our ivory tower things. We're going to cover a couple of key topics, just really an overview of the office, kind of how we came to be, what we're doing. What we're doing specifically is dealing with funding that have dedicated timelines and also have programs that we have to deliver at the end of the day. And in that, we have this world called challenges and opportunities. And I think that's some of the space, that's the conversation here. And with that, I want to say thank you for the work that you guys do, both back in your organizations and collectively here. Next slide, please. So December 2018, by executive order, Governor Brown created the Oregon Broadband Office. And it really started and culminized a lot of the work that had been done by volunteers and a volunteer group. So I'm not going to give you the long history of what led up from 2000 to 2009 to 2018, but that was the point where it said this now has an official office for the state. Following that, we had a number of years where we did some things. Obviously, the pandemic kicked in, and then pandemic funding came about, and really that changed so many things for folks. And so when people were locked down and things went online, and one of the things that happened is the digital divide actually got much wider during the lockdown. And I'll give you one simple example. I live in a small town. We had one bank. That bank went away. Financial transactions, you have to now drive, get in your car, you have to have a car, to go to another city and do your transactions and then come back. If you have access to the internet, you can do this. That goes with healthcare, education, and so many other aspects. Fast forward, I joined the office in 2021, and I was the office. So you were looking at the entire office. But the great thing is there were a lot of people. So we had a council that was meeting on a regular basis, just like a lot of you are here, talking about what we needed to do, and said there's a number of things that need to happen, not just have an office, but have staff. You need to have funding to run programs, also need to have studies to really understand that when we spend money wisely. We also have it in an open and transparent way. 22 is when a lot of activity started. I started to hire. I got authority to increase the office, and so we went from 1 to 4 to 9 people last year, and we are now up to 14 people in our office, all with different professional backgrounds, literally living across the entire state. And so, representing an office that looks very different than I think what I had envisioned first. So this year, we're looking at launching 3 programs and then also developing our digital equity program. Next slide, please. So this slide, just trying to say, well, what are we doing at the end of the day? So in 5 years, in 10 years, what are we hoping to get? And that's really, we're going to be putting money towards some key activities. The first one is for technical assistance for communities that includes industry, knowing that it's not just a public issue and solution, it's not just a private issue, but how do we get people together talking so that they can actually find solutions and propose it and then implement. So that's with our technical assistance. Following that, we don't just want to talk and have plans, we actually need more infrastructure. And we know that fiber is a preferred technology because it's future ready. So as technology increases, it can increase its capacity and speed. So we have 2 programs for that. One is a American Rescue Plan Act, there's ARPA, Capital Projects Fund, and then the other one we call BEAT. So it's not a neat little design that we wear on our clothes. It is actually Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. Get into some details on that. And then the last one is really, once people have access that may not have it today, how do we ensure that they're actually set up for success? So thinking of everything on the affordability. So you can put it in front of my house, but if I can't afford it, it's useless. It's still a divide and a barrier. If I don't have a digital device that actually allows me to interact with the internet and technology in a meaningful way that I can use for what I'm doing, so whether that's education or maybe it's not. Those are things that are important. Do I know how to use it? Do I know how to use it safely? So there's a world of opportunity here. There's also a world of scary things that are going on the internet. Won't go into that, but cybersecurity is one of the key things, not only for organizations, but also for us as individuals. So those are the 3 primary buckets of activities that we're working on. We also review policies, planning, we do a lot of other stuff. We have a map, so you're welcome to visit us on that. Next slide, please. So these are the pots of funds. The first one, we have the unique opportunity to actually be dealing with state dollars. We have $9.4 million from the Universal Service Fund that comes to us through Oregon's PUC, Public Utility Commission. And that's what we're running our very first grant program, and that's our planning and technical assistance. The second pot is 157 million from U.S. Treasury. We actually have we've been fully awarded, and we will be launching our program next month. The next bucket is for digital equity, and we've received funding for our planning, and that's 782,000. We will receive the implementation dollars probably sometime later this year. And then we have 689 million. And that is for the BEAD program, again, broadband equity access and deployment. We received $5 million of that, primarily for planning and then part for staff. Before I jump into this, who's been following the broadband? By those citizens, show of hands. All right, about half. Online. Hopefully it's the same thing. So this is the timeline of our rollout. So talk about the technical assistance program. We launched that in January. We're reviewing applications and hope to make awards in spring. Again, our capital projects we intend to launch next month. Our BEAD program, which is a primary deployment program, we intend on launching that, but I'll get in, it's complicated, but we intend on launching that third quarter of this year, and then looking at second quarter next year for our digital equity program. Next slide. So this is the technical assistance program. This is primarily for non-construction activities. Thinking of planning, and planning can be business plans, feasibility plans, strategic plans. So we've seen communities that have not had industry respond to their needs. And so the communities, it could be local government, it could be a nonprofit that actually step up and say, we're going to start this initiative. And whether they end up being the actual providers long-term, or they do a public-private partnership, or if you think of in the sense of recruitment, they're trying to say, we're giving you the business case. We're giving you data to help you actually come to our community and provide service to us. So that's one bucket of funds that we can help pay for. The second one, we actually allow for staffing. So if they desire to do that work with a staff member or hire a staff member, they can do that as well. And then for grant application support. So we have a number, it's a classic government thing. If you don't have more than one agency doing something, then it's not government, but you have multiple agencies doing something, then yes, it's government. Federal government has over 50 different broadband programs. They look different. Some are education, some are healthcare oriented, some are community oriented, some are more rural America oriented. And so for these, we're agnostic to the approach in the class. So if we can help communities get the solution that they need, whatever funding source that is, it can even be, privately funded, publicly funded. That's our goal at the end of the day. So eligible applicants, we include a variety of them. So municipalities, as defined by Oregon state statute, is a very broad group. It is a long list of types of organizations, and that does include the non-federally recognized tribes, along with electric co-ops, municipal affiliates, and nonprofits, internet service providers in partnership. We're not looking just to fund the private sector's planning and staffing needs, but making sure that they're actually connected and talking to and working with local governments and local partners. Next slide, please. So this one, our acronym, we call this EDP. I always think of 80s, 90s, hip hop, but I won't go there for you. This one here, it is primarily a broadband deployment program. This goal is for locations that don't have 100 by 20 megabits per second speeds are eligible to be funded. There's a list of eligible applicant types, and in the projects, it's really competitive. We max out grants at 20 million. We are looking really for the best of the best. This is not a program that will connect all across Oregon, but we're looking for quick results. So for anyone who's worked with ARPA, ARPA is a pandemic response bill from US Congress. And so we have 2 years basically to get some stuff done. Otherwise, they're going to say no more money. So quick results on this. Next slide, please. So for the BEAD program, and this is the large broadband program, which came out of, we use the acronym IJA, the Infrastructure Job Investment Act. This one is intended, and we had to do a series of steps, but it is intended to connect and have a plan for all Oregonians who are either unserved or underserved. And so in our preparation for plans, we've already submitted 4 different plans to the U.S. Department of Commerce, NTIA. First was our 5-year action plan. Then we came up with the initial proposal, volume 1, which is how you actually challenge locations. We have the right data, think of it that way. And if we don't, then how do you say this is wrong based off of this information? And that's working with US FCC as well. So in that, we have a series of priorities. So first priority is serving and making sure that funding goes to those that are unserved, lacking 25 by 3 megabits per second speed at their homes. Second priority is underserved, and those are between the 25 by 3 and the 100 by 20. And so you can see there on the slide, 180,000 Oregonians currently are in that category. That's not a small number. This doesn't mean that they can't drive somewhere or walk somewhere to get the service. But if you're doing things from your house, so thinking of, last time I had a doctor's visit, I don't want to do that somewhere else. It's either at the doctor's office or I want to be able to be in my home and be able to shut the door if we needed to. So there's a sense of privacy and security, I think, that goes along with that. Other priorities is community anchor institutions, so making sure that they have access if they need. And then fourth, there's non-deployment uses. Now, we've modeled the information that's been provided, and what we know is that Oregon will not receive and have enough money to actually do all 4 priorities. We will get priority 1. We will probably get most of priority 2, but our plan has to go forward and say, this is how we're planning to connect all of this. And we may have to look at mixed solutions on the technology side. So not just fiber, wireless is also an option. And if we don't get proposals that actually say we can do this, then we can look at alternative technologies as well, such as satellite. This is a big one. Again, internet for all. Next slide, please. So for digital equity, this means a lot of different things to different people, but at the end of the day, it's ensuring that people that don't have the access to devices, support, training, affordability, that they can, and that they can get it. And so for the Digital Equity Act, it actually identifies covered populations. And I know there was some conversation a little bit earlier in the room about what that looks like for some of the work that you all are doing. On the right-hand slide is the covered population list from low-income veterans, people that are over 60, those with disabilities, English language barrier, low literacy levels, also racial and ethnic group members, those incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and also individuals that primarily reside in rural areas. taking all that, the program priorities is what we are focusing on with Oregon's digital equity plan. The program has not been developed yet, and so we are waiting on the federal government, and they say any day now, they'll be releasing their notice of funding opportunity that says, here's how you can actually develop your program, the requirements of it. And the second part is, here's how much Oregon is going to get. So we don't know those things, but we're anticipating that anytime. This is really good. This is really important. And I will say one of the things that I've learned is that digital equity is not a common term that everyone uses. And a lot of people are in this space thinking of, schools, elementary schools, a lot of interaction with teachers and parents. You also have religious institutions that are in this space, nonprofits that are doing things, higher ed, obviously, as well, and other nonprofit groups. Next slide, please. So all that to say, we're going to be busy for the next 5 years plus, working on a lot of funding and grants. But at the end of the day, there are opportunities and challenges that we need assistance with. And so this is a part where I'd love to hear what some of your thoughts are. One of the first is workforce. We know that workforce is super important, and we're also in a space and a time where the federal government has invested and approved over $3 trillion worth of funding packages, primarily through ISA and ARPA, as well as the CHIPS Act, that is investing money into building and doing things across the United States. So nationally, a lot of activity is happening. Regionally, a lot of activity is happening because not only are we in Oregon, but Oregon isn't isolated. What we know is workforce along any of our borders, specifically along the Columbia, specifically along the Idaho, moves back and forth. You may work for a consultant firm that does jobs in both states, maybe even more states. So numbers just don't translate always as being the same. So how do we actually take all this in? So for workforce, some of the top fields that we're looking for, and I'll have a slide next on this, is construction laborer, telecom line installers, electric line installers, and customer service. The next item is permitting. So has anybody ever actually constructed a job, built a job, anything in Oregon? Even if it's on your home, you replace a fence, did you have to ask the question, why am I doing this? There's probably a really good reason why, but I'm not quite sure yet. Well, as projects get bigger and as you start to cross public lands, and it's not just one owner, it could be a federal agency, it could be a tribal lands, it could also be local government lands, it could be private lands. Permits and permission is required, and it starts to make everything super complicated. So we are looking at not only some of the challenges that we have at the local government level, also at the state level. So state permitting agencies and their reviews, those things take time. Some of these offices don't have capacity. So we are looking and trying to understand what that fully looks like. We also know our federal partners have issues as well. So BLM, if you try to get a permit through them, I can tell you it is extremely complicated. It is not quick. And so some of the federal agencies have been hiring. So U.S. Forest, they've actually dedicated a position just for permitting now for Oregon and Idaho. We also have pole owners. So it's not just one group that owns the poles across the entire state. It's a variety of different groups, and getting permission and ensuring that they're doing that consistent is also important. Supply chain, think about everything that needs to be bought. Where is it coming from? US government says that it needs to come Buy America, Build America. So we have requirements of needing to getting stuff from the US. There are some waivers that they're going to allow for certain some equipment that isn't made in the US. But tracking that, and it also is vehicles, construction equipment, conduit, lighting, and also for cybersecurity. So kind of going back to the as more things are connected and more people are connected, ensuring that there's safety and that there's education, and it's not just a one-time. It needs to be ongoing and constantly updated. So next slide, please. So this comes from our BEAD initial proposal volume 2. There's a section dedicated to workforce development. There's also all the other sections of the things that I talked about if you want to do a deeper dive and read in that. So this is a list of the occupations that our consultants said Oregon is going to need based off of just this one program. That's not the other programs, but just this one. So the top is, you look at this, it's construction laborers, but we have everything from project managers to software developers. So a question for the group. Who here is providing workforce development for one of these occupations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Are you considering any of the other groups to provide workforce development for? Raise your hand if yes or yeah.
I didn't follow the question.
Sure. So are you considering providing workforce development for, so if you're providing workforce development currently right now, but if you are not, but you're considering it, raise your hand. Okay. So I'm going to ask for your thoughts. So you have a captive audience, the Oregon Broadband Office with Business Oregon. What are your thoughts? What would be helpful for us to know as you are going through your conversations, both in your organizations, but collectively together, that we should take back? Any comments? If you don't have any comments, just say her.
Thank you for the detailed presentation. You started with an example of your small town, how that one bank left. While I'm not directly involved, I know we have community organizations that write to me about writing for whatever they are doing with you and in cooperation with you. My question is, how are we informing the lay citizens out there? What does it really mean to them? And all these things are important, so I'm not debating any of them, but what does the citizen think? What does it mean to them? What are some of the communications or associated communications you are developing to reach the lay audience? Because we all will consume it, we wouldn't even know the good that has happened. So how do you, it's good for the executive branch, Vince is here still. All these good things are happening because a lot of good people are doing good work in Salem and elsewhere. But how are we informing the citizens about what does it mean to me question?
Thank you for your question, Doctor. So stepping back, just informing, where we're at today is how we got here. And how we got here really started back in January of 2022. As a result of the ARPA Capital Projects program, and one of the first requirements is we actually have to have meaningful public engagement. And so we're like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, oh, well, you also have this very short window to do it. And it's like, so what we did is we put our plan together of doing both in-person and virtual town hall meetings and public meetings, trying to really capture organizations that were having any type of groups coming together. So one of them that we got to latch on to was the League of Oregon Cities. They were having a meeting and I was like, can we monopolize just a little bit of your time because you are, both elected official and administrators for your communities. So we started there and started by asking questions. And so we had common questions, really just to glean and to see where and how we should be developing programs. What should we address? What should we fund? What does this look like as far as a solution that's meaningful? So we started in 2022. We also have an advisory council. So the Oregon Broadband Advisory Council is another mechanism that we had. Fast forward, once we got into our BEAD program, and last May, we started out with the plans. We went around the state and held public meetings. We also held virtual meetings, trainings for the public at large, for industry partners, for education partners, local government. So we had a lot of dedicated time really trying to have more of an omnipresent approach of both saying, doing, having our website, and really just selecting. And we also had telephone surveys that were across the entire state as well, so that the plans that we developed last summer and in the fall were really reflective of the data, as opposed to, I think, I like, this might be a good solution. So that's where we started in the plan development and having engagement with the public. And where it goes forward is, as we do this, we also know who we've talked to. So utilizing social media, utilizing our website, utilizing the legislative process, providing updates. We provide an annual report to our council, who then sends that out to the legislature of what we've done, both on the policy side and on the funding side.
Thank you. I wasn't sure whether the question was about the kind of outreach to help define the role of the office and the means to take the work forward, or if it was about folks that would become that future workforce, helping Oregonians consider the potential career paths and opportunities ahead. So I wasn't quite sure that way, whether the question was about how we're reaching lay people in terms of this is coming, there's an opportunity for developing skills in this space as you look at the types of jobs and careers that are ahead. So has there been any effort that way, Daniel?
So our communication is ongoing. So again, for the plan, but for where we're going long term, once we start making awards, we'll be utilizing both the online map, that shows where awards will be made, also status update of that. So that's probably the most common thing that we get in the office is, I'm a resident, I live in this area, I don't have access, or I did have access, and for XYZ reasons, the provider no longer provides service. And we've seen everything from, wireless to wired internet service.
So, and this was very helpful, so thank you. I represent an institution that's got both urban and rural areas. We serve all the way up to Cascade Locks, Government Camp. There has been a county project to be expanding broadband. And what's the interplay between that work and your office? Or is there?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. And, there are projects, there are activities that are happening without the state. And those things are awesome. But when there's, a need, and a lot of times it comes in the funding side. So at the local level, they're trying to figure out their solutions or what their partnerships look like. But when they're starting to say, well, how do we implement this? That's typically when they give us a call and they say, what funding opportunities do you have coming up? We also know there's funding opportunities that the federal government has that aren't directly through the state. That's through our USDA, through the FCC, and also through U.S. Commerce. So we share information. And if they ask for more, then we try to provide that, and if not, direct them to resources.
I just wanted to say, as part of a workforce, one of our main issues on the Warm Springs Reservation was 28% of our residents on our tribe have access to internet, and like all our internet's slow. It's like 18 megabytes per second. So I had to transfer to a different company, and now it's like 24 megabytes per second, but I'm paying like double the cost just for 4 extra megabytes per second. And it's like $100 a month, and not everyone can afford to like upgrade that 4 extra megabytes per second on a reservation. It's super expensive, and it's really hard for quite a lot of people who are really poor. Like there's only one person that can afford it, because they're barely making like 26,000 a year in one household with 14 people living in the house. So it's really, really hard on a reservation trying to get access to internet. And that's one of our biggest challenges in the workforce, was to have good, reliable internet that was actually fast, that people were able to do trainings. And so I think that this program, it would be nice to see some kind of like priority, like how you're prioritizing like the megabytes. I like to see that. But it would be nice if like certain places, like could be a little more prioritized like that, because it's just hard. Like my parents, they have no access to internet. And like certain other communities throughout have no access to internet. And I think it's just a real struggle for a lot of people. Plus they have no computers, and they have to like come to the actual library like the olden days to have access to internet. It's just kind of nice to see your guys' program in development. I just kind of curious as to any of these jobs, like the software developers and like other things, if they're going to be like remote opportunities, and like what you're thinking about that for engineering and just kind of stuff like that.
Thank you. And, being affected by not having service or lacking service, or how service is unaffordable, $100 a month is not affordable. It is not an affordable option, especially if it's not great. So I would say, let's connect afterwards. We do have a staff member that's over in Madras, so I'd love to just connect you with him, and maybe there can be some follow-up with that. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. These positions won't be funded or won't be working for the broadband office, but this is collectively in the state. So they could be, private sector, public sector, variety of different options. And I will just touch on one thing. One thing that we have seen, and I'm an example of this, is I used to have to work in an office. We don't anymore. I work from home. And so there's great things and bad things about that. But again, that allows us as a broadband office to literally tap into a pool of people that don't just live in the valley, but actually live across the state with some very unique skill sets and networks.
Right, Ashley, and then I've got 2 more after that.
Sure. Thank you for your presentation. Around the construction laborers, I'm curious about, the things to account for. There's 5 people leaving the industry for every 1 person coming back. There's still a lot of occupational segregation that happens in construction. And so there's like culturally, there's a lot of things where underrepresented communities within the construction sector, do they feel comfortable to even engage in that way when you're looking at those numbers? And then third, it takes like if you've never been in construction or maybe have a little bit of knowledge, it takes time to get to be a skilled person in construction. So I'm just curious, like, how does all of that being considered? Because a lot of people say, well, the youth, and it's like, yeah, but it's not flipping a switch and they're going to be great, the next day. So I'm just curious how you all are seeing. Oh, and then sorry, one more thing. And then construction also, I think on the cultural piece, it is one of the industries with the highest rate of suicide. And so, again, like we're trying to position these jobs as good paying jobs without thinking about holistically what that actually means and what we're promoting people into.
Sure, I appreciate the question, and there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
But and I know we have time.
Yeah.
So we'd love to follow up with you, but one of the very first actions that we did as a part of our BEAD planning grant was to sponsor the Equitable Broadband Boot Camp that was held at the University of Oregon. So us with a whole number of different partners. I'm just saying, not only do we need to bring people together, but we need to be very strategic in how to do that in specific training. So there needs to be more opportunities, clearly. There will be more opportunities, but how we do that and how other people that are, I don't know who all is in this room, but I'm sure there's probably other people that need to be in the room for this conversation. Next slide.
Okay, there. Great questions. And I think, Daniel, one of the things we can do in follow-up is connect you with the 9 local workforce boards as projects are awarded and you have a better sense of where those workforce needs are going to be across the state. The 9 local workforce boards, Ashley represents one of them. I think Andrew stepped out. But we'll make sure and get you connected with the local workforce boards for that more regionally focused workforce needs. Given that this is sort of the overall landscape of what you anticipate needing, I imagine as projects are awarded, it'll look a little different region by region. We have time for 2 more questions, the folks that have their cards up, and then we'll move to our next agenda item. I don't know who was first. Okay.
All right, thank you. Just a couple questions, comments real quick. So I really liked the topic of accessibility of broadband on reservations, and that is not unique to Warm Springs. I've heard similar things at most of the other reservations around the state. And that ties in really well, and this is kind of a general comment. You had sort of asked about how the places that do workforce development are thinking about some of these things. The remote work piece is a huge aspect, and in STEM disciplines, it's sort of been portrayed as, well, get an engineering job, or get an engineering degree, you can get a job any place, and that's any place except for in your community for many folks. And the ability to work remote is really key, and there are remote jobs in many of these fields available. So I guess what I would say is how we're thinking about that is that preparing folks for jobs where they can make an impact in their community is really important. The other thing I would say related to that is cybersecurity is an area that we're very much thinking about and doing a lot of work in. And I think the questions I have are, I guess, the workforce thing, the slide you just had didn't really address cybersecurity. Related to that, you've shown new positions. I'm wondering if you've accounted for attrition. As we've looked at semiconductor needs in the state, it turns out there's a fair amount of attrition, and just meeting those needs are fairly big. And when you couple that with the new positions, I suspect it would be fairly, it would be a significantly larger number than what you've shown.
Thank you for those questions. I don't know that I'll be able to go through all of them, but one thing that I will say specific for the BEAD program is that cybersecurity has to be addressed by each project that's submitted. So we won't be funding projects unless they have not only a plan, but how that training looks. So that's a component of that. Cybersecurity, so the list of positions, that's to get projects deployed. That's not what happens as a result of ongoing. So that, if you start to look at that, that's a multiplier effect. So, the maintenance operation of systems, doesn't just, you just don't build it and then it's perfect. Things happen. Poles get hit, ice breaks things, earth moves. There's all sorts of phenomena that happen, both that are natural and man-made. Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation. I think broadband access always comes up as one of the biggest barriers whenever we talk about technology adoption. So I appreciated your presentation. I do have a question, and my question pertains more to rural Oregon. Why not focus on wireless and satellite first, rather than building out infrastructure like laying out fiber, et cetera? And the reason I bring this up is because if I look at developing countries and how landline and telephone access evolved, many people didn't have access to landlines, but the mobile revolution just made it happen. That's really the premise of my question. And I'm sure you have reasons for this, but I'd like to understand from an efficiency point of view.
Thank you for the question. And we are. So the federal government, so the federal money says, here's your priority. So it's Oregon's priority that we try to take fiber as far as we can. But we know that one, the money will take it everywhere. It's cost prohibitive. So we need probably 6 times the amount of money. We're not going to get that from the feds. So that's what our first call will be. We're looking for proposals. If we don't get those proposals, we'll be looking for alternative technologies. So that's part of the process to get to the point of actually making awards. So we won't be making awards until we've gone through the full process. So it's part of the solution. And so we'll be doing that statewide.
Well, join me in thanking Daniel for joining us. I'm sure this is not the last that we'll hear from the broadband office. Sorry, I asked you to join me in thanking and I didn't. Thanks, Daniel. This is likely not the last we'll hear from the broadband office. This is a topic of conversation around workforce retention, recruitment, replacement rates, all of the things that we've been talking about. And certainly some of the skills and occupations that were outlined there are in our scope of work as the Technology Industry Consortia, and some are not. But ways that we can support them in the workforce considerations, as well as be thinking about broadband from an accessibility perspective, equitable access to the skills, training, and opportunities that we are identifying will be important. So thank you for getting us started on that journey of better understanding what's happening in broadband in Oregon. So for the balance of our time today, you are going to hear briefly from me, but then I'm going to turn the mic over to Amy Cox, the director of HEC's Office of Research and Data. And Amy is going to provide some updates from our year 2 report. So as you may remember, in the Future Ready Oregon statute, an annual report is required to be submitted to the governor's office and the legislature, representing a number of measures to evaluate the outcomes and return on investment of the Senate Bill 1545 funding. The year 1 report really focused on implementation, standing up the programs. Certainly it represented, I think, the first maybe 6 to 8 months of implementation, standing up both the industry consortia and the grant funding opportunities. And the year 2 report starts to dive into a little bit more around participant outcomes. Very briefly, because you all are well familiar with Future Ready Oregon, I'll just remind you, it's a $200 million investment. It really is a model that aims to strengthen Oregon's economic competitiveness by focusing on key sectors of our economy. It aims to close gaps in educational attainment and employment by centering the needs of historically underserved students and communities. It provides flexible funding that couples education and training supports with wraparound supports and services, really to overcome barriers to persistence and completion, successful completion of programs that move folks into employment. And lastly, it advances a shared leadership model, which is seen in the work of the industry consortia and the work that you all do, convening industry leaders and employers with education and training providers and community-based organizations to really co-create solutions. We also see that shared leadership model in our grant making, and you'll hear about some examples of those grant-funded projects, specifically in technology space, as we move through these slides today. Next slide, please. Just some themes in the administration of our workforce ready grants, as well as the other programs, and you'll hear more about this from Amy, but I'd like to highlight just some of the things that are unique about Future Ready Oregon that have really been transformational for folks participating and receiving funds. The flexibility of the funding and partnerships have really been crucial to the development and expansion of programs. We're learning about promising practices like employer partnerships and culturally informed supports and wraparound services. We're implementing individualized supports and technical assistance. I think you've heard from me that the HEC is retaining technical assistance contractors who support prospective applicants throughout the application process, provide feedback to applicants who were unsuccessful, and the Future Ready Oregon grant administration staff builds communities of practice and offers ongoing technical assistance both to grantees and their partners throughout the grant cycle. We're also hearing how important hands-on training and the wraparound supports are to the participant success. And we're learning a lot about innovative approaches to education delivery. And you'll hear again about some of those today, but examples include mobile training, on-site incumbent worker training, providing culturally relevant curriculum, culturally and linguistically specific career pathways, high flex education and training delivery, which is relevant given our prior presentation about broadband access. It's hard to provide flexible education and training delivery if access to broadband is insufficient. We're learning about earn and learn models and the importance of the flexible funding to provide for career exploration and short-term credentialing in ways that other funding doesn't allow. So with that summary and those summary remarks, I would love to introduce my colleague, Amy Cox, the Director of the Office of Research and Data at the HEC. And she's going to really dive into the most recent annual report.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you all for letting me be here today. It is a pleasure to be with you. For the record, I'm Amy Cox, Director of the Office of Research and Data. I am here representing a whole team of people. I did not write this report single-handedly. Probably 6 people in our office have been working on Future Ready Oregon, and I really just want to recognize them as well. I also want to say on a personal note how much I appreciate the work of this consortium. Not only would the report not be possible without technology, but also we know in our office the upward mobility that technology jobs can really provide. And so it's been exciting to hear about the work that you are doing and great to be here. Some of you have seen this slide already in other presentations I've given, but for those who haven't, I wanted to put it up here. This is really providing a little context to how our office is approaching this multi-year evaluation of Future Ready Oregon. It is our office's responsibility to document and assess the impacts of Future Ready Oregon, the ways that the program is stood up and put into place, and the long-term outcomes of the suite of investments that is known as Senate Bill 1545. We are grounding all of our work in these 2 intertwined questions. Does Future Ready Oregon lead to greater economic security security for individuals and communities, but also security for businesses and whole industry sectors, and for the state then as a whole. And does Future Ready Oregon improve equity, leading with racial equity, but not excluding, of course, many other kinds of equity, equity across the training opportunities, equity across employment, industries, career advancement. And I say these are intertwined, and we really do see them that way because one can imagine greater economic security without greater equity not really being very sustainable, especially from a state perspective, right? And similarly, it would be hard to imagine greater equity that didn't incorporate economic security. So we then operationalize these questions across a suite of different, an array of different areas in this program, including access, practice or implementation, and then outcomes. Next slide, please. This year's report, as Jennifer said, provides some initial participant outcomes for Future Ready Oregon programs, but also continues to document the implementation progress that has been made. The report covers the period for implementation through about fall of 2023. And for participant level data through June of 2023. And I'll remind you of that when I get to those results. But I want to just take a moment to explain, why are you talking so much about implementation? And for those of you who have seen the report, it is thick, it is long, it provides a lot of detail about implementation. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one is because we do want to assess, are the programs getting stood up in ways that are consistent with the statute, right? And number two, and this is perhaps even more important, is really because we need to document what happens now in the early years so that we can return to it when we're trying to interpret the long-term outcomes. So imagine, if you will, if somebody said, hey, I've got a great new treatment for a disease. We're going to distribute it across this community where infection rates are high. It doesn't really have an impact. And people say, well, that was just like a failed medicine. But actually, maybe it wasn't implemented properly. Maybe the medicine was great, but it was not taken with food or something, you know? And so that's the reason we really spend these first couple years with a lot of deep dives into implementation, because we know we will need that and return to it when we're interpreting long-term outcomes as well. But in this year's report, we also talk about participants served and the services that they engaged in, and how those things compare to what we're seeing needed in the labor force statewide broadly. We use a variety of different data sources in the report. I won't go into them, but I'm happy to answer questions about them. And of course, we pay special attention for the 10 priority populations laid out in the statute. Next slide. Some of the key findings in this report, this is the 60,000 foot summary, but some of the key findings in the report are that nearly 9,500 participants were served in the first 13 months of Future Ready Oregon programs. That is a large number. People say, well, how large? How would you grade that? But we don't have an overall Future Ready Oregon goal for number of participants, so I cannot tell you that. But what I can tell you is we view this as a large number for two reasons. One is because Prosperity 10,000, the first program that got underway from Future Ready Oregon, does have a goal. It has a goal of serving 10,000 participants. And it has met almost 40% of that goal, serving 3,854 in the first 25% of the time. So that's quite strong. And also because many of the early grants, which relied on Oregon General Fund dollars and had to be spent by June 2023, focused on infrastructure, buying new CTE equipment, buying new new technology equipment for career programs, creating new outreach strategies to serve priority populations. Those are impacts that we'll see in terms of, or that are intended to see, I should say, in terms of numbers of participants served in coming years. So the fact that 9,400 participants were served in that first 13 months does include a significant number of infrastructure-focused grants that weren't serving participants. Secondly, 92% of the participants were from priority populations. Among those participants who divulged their own individual characteristics. We saw these high rates of reaching priority populations across the different programs. And we heard a lot about how engagement with community groups really helped increase by interview questions, I should say, by qualitative evidence, helped increase that number. Terms of services provided, excluding support services, we saw across the programs a 97% completion rate. So participants who enrolled in services were almost all likely to complete those programs. And we saw those high rates across priority populations and across the different programs too. 31, about a third of participants did use wraparound support services that were provided by not all grants, but a number of grants. And lastly, and this is a really important finding in this early year, is that the participants were more diverse than Oregon's labor force. Now, the reason that's important is because it's an essential first step to creating a more equitable workforce training system and a more equitable labor force. Next. Of course, you all are very knowledgeable about the industry consortia and the Workforce Ready grants, but there are 6 other programs also in Future Ready Oregon, as Jennifer alluded. Prosperity 10,000, post-secondary career pathways at the community colleges, registered apprenticeships administered by the Bureau of Labor and Industry, youth programs administered by Youth Development Oregon, which is a division of the Oregon Department of Education, credit for prior learning, which are administered at public colleges and universities, Workforce Ready grants, the Industry Consortia, and the Workforce Benefits Navigators at the 9 local workforce development boards. Just a few highlights from some of these other programs I want to point out. I already mentioned Prosperity 10,000 and the 3,800 participants there. At post-secondary career pathways, which are career training programs at the community colleges that offer stackable credentials. So you can get a short-term credential, you can get employment in that career area, you can come back, get a next level credential and move, advance in that career. Post-secondary career pathways, those were 1-year grants that served 3,300 additional participants. And many of those grants also were infrastructure grants. We heard many times over about being able to purchase state-of-the-art equipment that community colleges hadn't had for particular programs, being able to develop outreach strategies to diversify students participating that would stay in place for years to come, and things like that. Registered apprenticeships served 316 participants. I want to point out that registered apprenticeships, to register a new apprenticeship program takes a long time, like 11 months. So the fact that they got 316 participants by June 2023 was an excellent start. We anticipate we will see many more in the next round as those apprenticeships, as many of those final stages of registration. Youth programs served over 1,000 participants, and credit for prior learning. These are grants applied grants supplied to colleges, community colleges and public universities who applied for them. It is a means for providing college credit, post-secondary credit for education that either occurred outside of an educational institution, like military training, or education that occurred in another country and didn't transfer to the US. And these grants were one-time funds to be able to expand credit for prior learning options and abilities at any of the institutions that applied. 19 of the 25 public institutions applied and were awarded grants that expanded the ways that that credit could be assessed, expanded staffing to do so, training, so that the credit could be more broadly earned and awarded by students. Workforce Ready grants in the first several months really is what it was for that round one. Workforce Ready grants served almost 1,000 participants. Again, many of those also focused on infrastructure grants. The industry consortia, we were happy to be able to say in this second year report that all of them had launched and begun their work. The industry consortia funded by ARPA funds were a little bit later than some of the earlier programs that had to spend money by June 2023 to be able to get going. And the same thing with workforce benefits navigators. We're really happy to be able to report that program was up and going, it being fully funded by ARPA funds. And so all in all, across the programs, both in terms of implementation and in terms of numbers of participants served, we saw a lot of good news, Next slide, please. I do want to call out a few things that are focused in particular on technology, a few findings that are focused in particular on the technology industry. In terms of really gratifying information, we found technology occupation training in many of the Future Ready Oregon programs that were granting workforce training service dollars, including Prosperity 10,000, post-secondary career pathways, and the Workforce Ready grants, of course. In terms of participants engaging in that technology occupation training, the results are a bit more mixed. About half of Future Ready Oregon participants enrolled in topic-based job training. The vast majority of these were in post-secondary career pathways at the community colleges, which by definition is topic-focused job training, right? Outside of post-secondary career pathways, 194 participants that, which was 11% of those who participated in topic-focused job training, were in technology-related training. It is not a high number of the 9,400 participants in Future Ready Oregon. Now, I think there are potentially a couple of reasons for this. One of them is that job training is sometimes the next step in the workforce development, right? So the period covered here, again, runs through June 2023. And it is quite possible that job training was picking up, topic-focused job training was picking up as participants got some earlier pieces of training under their belt. It is also possible that technology-focused job training needs more attention. And that's why we called that out in the report about the number of participants focused in or enrolling in topic-focused job training. And then lastly, related to technology training, technology occupation training, we heard multiple reports of how the lack of broadband access, thank you, Daniel, I don't know if he's still in the room, the lack of broadband access in rural and less population dense, thank you, communities, really hindered technology and healthcare training in particular. So that's a particular issue, not only in terms of having broadband access, but also in being able to access technology training. Thank you. Next slide, please. We ended the report with 4 overarching conclusions and recommendations that follow across these many programs. The first of which is we found consistent and repeated evidence that engaging those served is associated with improved outcomes. This is very important to state out loud. It may sound obvious, but it is evidence of some of Future Ready Oregon doing some government granting differently. We saw this across the levels of engagement: applicants, grantees, participants, community organizations. And the recommendation that follows: future workforce development investments, especially those that aim to advance equity, should prioritize engagement with the communities intended to benefit from that investment, and current investments should continue to do so. Overall finding number 2, one of the most commonly reported benefits of Future Ready Oregon fundees among the grantees was the flexibility of funding and the ability to provide support services. Many workforce development funding streams do not allow for this. So this was critical in the words of many grantees. Future workforce development investments, therefore, should include the flexibility and for allowable use of funds to encourage innovation, maximize reach, and improve program success, and current investments should continue to do so. Thank you. Overall finding 3, topic-focused job training, especially in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology, is not, at least not yet, common among the participants. Only 29% of participants outside of career pathways enrolled in topic-focused training, and less than half of these were in the key industry sectors. The recommendation that follows: Future Ready Oregon programs should expand workforce development trainings for the healthcare, manufacturing, and technology sectors. And then finally, administrative burden can be high, especially in rapid, multifaceted programs like Future Ready Oregon, which has multifaceted funding, even for a particular grantee. Support from agencies in the application, awarding, and reporting processes eased this burden and improved efficiency and accuracy. This, again, may sound obvious, but government granting does not always include sufficient administrative staffing to be able to lift some of that burden off of grantees. And in this case, we heard repeated appreciation for some of that. And so the recommendation that follows: future workforce development investments should provide the time and staffing resources to plan how to build processes and tools that ease the administrative burden on grantees for different funding sources, and current investments should continue to do so. And with that, I think you had a couple remarks about upcoming grants.
I do. We haven't had a chance to talk with you all about the most recent grant awards, so I thought we'd just give you a primer of what technology projects were funded in the most recent round of Workforce Ready Grant. In your packets, these slides are available, so I'm going to move through them quickly, but this is a map indicating the projects that are focused on advancing technology skills, occupations, and career-connected learning. The green stars indicate projects that are technology specific, so only focused on career pathways that would fall in that technology sector. And then the blue stars indicate projects that overlap healthcare, manufacturing, as well as technology. Next slide, please. I want to give you some highlights from a couple of the projects. One of which is with the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. This project is in partnership with Blue Mountain Community College, Del Mar Industries, and Cayuse Solutions. They're offering pathways for drone and UAS technology, operator licensing, that's unmanned aircraft systems. The funding will support participant training costs, including exam and licensing fees. There's a 3-month job placement opportunity with the employer partners in the projects. And the funding, again, you heard about the importance of the flexibility of the Future Ready Oregon funding. This project is also supporting participants by offsetting the costs of childcare, transportation, work gear or readiness supplies, and job coaching. Another technology specific investment is with the Oregon Solar Energy Education Fund. This project has 2 parts. One is through the Limited Renewable Energy Technician Apprenticeship Program, where the Future Ready Oregon funding, again, because of its flexibility, is able to come alongside participants direct supports, including tuition reimbursement, paying for books and work gear, again, those job readiness supplies for apprentices enrolled in the program. The second part of this project is paid internships, and the Oregon Solar Energy Education Fund is developing partnerships with solar companies to fund paid internship programs. And the third project I'll draw your attention to is a partnership with the University of Oregon Knight campus. This investment actually leverages a National Science Foundation grant award and expands a partnership with several community colleges across the state. It's a transfer pathway into advanced degrees at University of Oregon and supports that master's level workforce training through paid internships, as well as scholarships for lower income, both bachelor's and master's degree students. Provides culturally specific professional development opportunities. And again, that award leverages a larger investment and an SF award. There are a number of other projects that the map indicated, but we wanted to give you a flavor of some of the projects that were awarded funding. I know we're getting tight on time. I can't see the clock from here, but certainly want to pause and see if there are any questions from you all about the year 2 report, some of the findings that you heard from Amy, or these most recent investments. There's additional detail about projects awarded funding available on the website, but any questions we can answer here for you today. This is what happens when you stand between them and adjournment. Yes. Okay. So there are no questions, but Amy and I are certainly available to you all at any time if something comes up. So thank you, Amy. I'm going to go ahead and stay here to provide closing remarks so that I don't have to run back. I did want to give you a little bit of an update on where we're headed next. So first and foremost, your leadership team has identified the 2024 meeting schedule. Isn't that nice? So you won't be hearing from us a month before the meeting. We will make sure this is, of course, in your packet, but we'll make sure that you have these dates in an email as well. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 21st. We'll narrow down time and location. Really, again, I know we've met in this room twice, but trying to provide geographic diversity in where we meet. So we're looking for some other options for ourselves for May, July, and October. I also want to acknowledge that the request for applications for technology specific funding that you all have informed today, we anticipate that that will be released in April. So forthcoming. Let's see. The next item I want to flag for you is the opportunity to launch some industry focus groups. So we've heard from you all, as well as your counterparts in healthcare and manufacturing, that as we're thinking about equitable opportunities and identifying barriers to equitable recruitment and retention and career advancement in these occupations, as we're trying to inform education and training responses to the needs of industry, that while we have industry around the table, folks are saying we really want to have a focused conversation with industry. So the industry consortia coordinators, the team, which includes Sarah Foster, you heard her name mentioned earlier, who leads our healthcare work, Carrie Weichel-Delaplane, who leads the manufacturing work, and me on behalf of you all, will be launching some employer focus groups. We have dedicated some consulting, some funding for consulting capacity. Turner and his team are supporting that work, and we'll be launching focus groups across the state. We expect that to happen in the spring. So likely late spring, we will be engaging with employers across the state. I've had the opportunity to meet with the executive leadership team to inform some of what that might look like, both what questions are meaningful, how can we best inform our work, what do we really need to hear from employers, and then also thinking about the format for those. So if we do approximately 4 focus groups across the state related to technology, what we've been talking about is that the pure tech employers and the tech-enabled employment can likely convene around the same table, but that we might want to think about some of the regionally unique technology workforce needs. And so we'll be reaching out to you all electronically between now and the next meeting to continue to inform how that work will develop, but wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then just a couple of other upcoming opportunities to engage the State Workforce and Talent Development Board, which includes a number of members of this group. Venkat and now Skip and Janelle are all members of that board. Their next meeting is March 8th, next Friday. And Sarah Foster and Carrie Weichel-Delaplane will be providing a presentation on the work of the industry consortia, the standing up of the 3 consortia, and where you all are at in terms of advancing your short-term objectives and beginning the work of looking ahead to informing policy and funding priorities. And then last but not least, May 14th and 15th, the Workforce and Talent Development Board and the Higher Education Coordinating Commission will have their biannual talent summit, where we hope there will be an opportunity for some conversations about the work of the industry consortia, what we're learning through Future Ready Oregon about the shared leadership model, the importance of flexible funding, and individualized grantee supports. So that's a lot on the horizon, but wanted to make sure you were aware of work that you'll be able to engage with, work that we're doing on your behalf over the next couple of months as we prepare for your May quarterly meeting. With that, did I make it?
Yep.
With 1 minute to spare, unless there are any questions or closing remarks from our leadership team. They don't want to stand between you. All right. With that, thank you to those members who joined us online to make sure that we were able to advance the recommendations. We really appreciate everyone's engagement. It was really, it was a great conversation. Appreciate the way that you all are thinking about this work. And with that, we will adjourn. Safe travels to everyone.